The Ag Tribes Report is brought to you by Legacy Interviews, a video service that captures people as they really are, so the future knows who they really were. Here is Legacy Interviews guest Carol Hensley discussing the opportunity for a quiet person to speak their mind.
How was it for you, the experience?
Very comfortable. Tried to sit down every morning for a week or two and reflect on my life. And I'm recalling well over 70 years. I may not talk very much, but I think a lot. And I listen to other people. If they don't talk a lot, they're surely thinking. And if you ask them their opinion, they may share it with you. You've asked for my opinion. I don't mind sharing that. I think I probably talked more than I should have.
No, not at all.
Welcome to the Ag Tribes Report, a breakdown of the top stories affecting the culture of agriculture, with your host, Vance Crowe. The report begins in 3, 2, 1. Let's begin.
Welcome to the Ag Tribes Report. I'm your host, Vance Crowe. Each week, I bring on a co-host to represent the perspectives of one of the many ag tribes that collectively make up U.S. and Canadian agriculture. This week, we have Joe Ailts, a crop consultant from northwestern Wisconsin who specializes in soil microbiology and regenerative farming practices, with a particular expertise in rhizophagy and nutrient synergies. He focuses on innovative approaches like cover cropping with rye and corn stubble and optimizing micronutrient management to improve soil health and crop productivity. I met Joe at the ARM Services event in Wisconsin, where I was giving a talk on succession planning, and we had a fantastic conversation. And so I decided to invite him on the podcast. Joe, welcome to the Ag Tribes Report.
Vance, it's an honor to be here. I'm thrilled to be here and to have this great conversation with you.
So how is planting going up in Wisconsin right now?
Sure. So I'm up in northwest Wisconsin. We're north of the 45th parallel. We're a stone's throw from Santa's workshop up here. I know Canadians will disagree, but we're about as far north as you can get in Wisconsin without considering it the Northwoods. We had an awesome first 2 weeks of May. It was 85 degrees and sunny and no rain. Soil conditions were perfect. We got the crop in the ground in record rapid fashion. But then Mother Nature throws us a curveball. And last week we had cold rain, 38 degrees, woke up Saturday morning, there was frost on the ground. So the corn had emerged. It's now frosted on its tips. It's lime green in color. Farmers run around like chickens with their heads cut off going, oh my God, what's wrong with my corn? My advice is go fishing, come back in a couple of weeks. It's going to be 85 degrees again this weekend. Everything's going to be okay.
So the frost, is that's not going to kill off a percentage of it? You're not worried about that?
Not on the corn. So the growing point still below the ground until V5 growth stage. And so even though the first couple leaves took a little bit of singe, the corn's going to be just fine. Many are asking how much should we take off the top end? Probably some, unfortunately. Any stress is going to cap the upside potential. But I fully suspect that we're going to see this crop turn around in rapid fashion, and we're going to be back to business in no time.
So you run an agronomy program that I think is quite unique. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do day to day?
Sure. I'm an independent crop consultant here in Northwest Wisconsin. I just do traditional agronomy for a lot of the farmers here in the 4-county area or just outside Minneapolis, St. Paul. But I also have a really strong interest in soil health and regenerative agriculture. So I love cover crops. I love minimizing tillage. I love using biological products and all the other things that are underneath that umbrella. My goal is to meet farmers where they're at, figure out where they're at on their soil health journey, and then start to plug in the various facets of the soil health principles to help them move along that spectrum so that they too can be happy with where they're at in terms of their own farming principles. So it's an exciting space to be in. It's the Wild West. There's not many people out there doing this. Unique location here in a unique business philosophy that I thoroughly enjoy.
And in the last couple of weeks, we've been talking a lot about AI and maybe eating agronomist lunch. Are you worried about AI coming for you?
Yeah, I'm absolutely terrified and thrilled at the same time. So Grok has become one of my best friends. If you're not familiar, Grok is Elon's AI tool. I ask it questions all the time, and its ability to do math is absolutely mind-blowing. So I use it for my math calculations, and some will call me lazy for that. That's okay. I'm willing to accept that. But at the same time, I need time efficiency in my job, just like anybody else does. Time's our most valuable valuable resource. Grok helps me save time. And that, I think, is an incredible benefit. Will it put me out of a job eventually? Yeah, sure. If farmers figure out how to ask Grok the right questions about agronomy, I'm no longer needed on the farm. However, until that time becomes realistic, I'm happy to help answer questions for farmers using Grok to do so.
Sounds good. All right, let's get into the show. On this week's episode of the Ag Tribes Report, we're going to dive into the Farm Bureau's heated battle with the MAHA Commission, who just posted that they have some questions about pesticide safety. We're also going to explore how the One Big Beautiful Bill promises $10 billion in tax relief for farmers. We're also going to talk about the New World Screwworm Outbreak threatening U.S. livestock from Mexico. And we're going to talk a little bit about a SNAP fraud scheme that is over $66 million. We will also explore the Bitcoin land price report. We're going to hear Joe's take on his Peter Thiel paradox and find out who his worthy adversary is. And we're going to do that all in just 30 minutes. So let's get started. Headline number one, Farm Bureau versus MAHA, the pesticide safety battle. The American Farm Bureau Federation sent me an email. It wasn't just to me, it was to everybody, talking about their take on the MAHA report. They have launched a fierce counterattack against the Commission's report questioning modern farming practices, particularly pesticides like atrazine and glyphosate. AFBF President Zippy Duvall calls the report unscientific fear-mongering that disrespects farmers and threatens affordable food production. The Farm Bureau argues decades of EPA regulations prove these chemicals are safe and essential, warning that restrictions could spike grocery prices and devastate farm livelihoods. But MAHA supporters aren't backing down. They argue the report exposes legitimate health risks linking pesticides to cancer and endocrine disruption, and they're challenging the Farm Bureau's reliance on EPA approvals, claiming that they're tainted by corporate influence from companies like Bayer. MAHA advocates push for sustainable alternatives like organic and regenerative methods. So I am very interested to hear what do you think, as someone deep into soil microbiology, regenerative practices, where do you stand on this new MAHA report and where the Farm Bureau is pushing back on it?
Yeah, I'm a bit torn. I think it's a great question. So if we remember back to campaign season, RFK and Nicole Shanahan mentioned regenerative agriculture and soil health many times throughout the campaign. Little disappointed not to see it mentioned in the MAHA report, but also perhaps unrealistic expectations given the fact that a lot of this report focused on what were some of the root causes of childhood diseases. Now, certainly some advocates out there can suggest that, well, we really need to start with farming and regenerative agriculture and soil health. But at the same time, I'm willing to give them a bit of a pass in that they really called out, I think, the most important aspects of the factors that impact childhood diseases. And perhaps it's just too soon for us to expect regenerative agriculture and soil health to be part of the conversation. I think it'll come. Maybe we're not quite there yet in this first report.
So regenerative ag is this like very big, squishy term. When you talk about regenerative ag, what does it mean?
Yeah, great question. So I think the best description of regenerative ag I've ever heard was given by fellow podcaster Monty Bottens, whose simple definition is always improving. I like the simplicity of that definition. Always improving, I think, is something you can apply to however you would choose to apply to your farming practices. And then if that falls into the regenerative camp, I'm going to give you credit for that if you're actually improving something. To be more nuanced about that, I think regenerative agriculture is something that should align with the 5 soil health principles. I'm not going to try to rattle those off here because I know I'll forget one, but things like cover cropping and minimizing tillage and using biologicals and improving soil health, I think all things that are fit underneath the regenerative umbrella. But I do agree with you. It's very murky what the true definition of that concept means.
Do you think that we should be opening up the EPA and start rerunning these tests or have new qualifications for chemistries like atrazine and glyphosate?
So again, great question. These things are so loaded and they cause so much controversy because oftentimes we're going to give answers that are reductionist, very simplistic and straightforward without a whole lot of nuance. I fully believe that the dose makes the poison. And so, it's a function of how much do we accrue over a lifetime, and does anybody really know? So a single point glyphosate application and exposure to that probably isn't going to have a whole lot of negative impact on health, but you continue to repeat exposure exposure over multiple times, over multiple seasons, I think that poses questions on whether or not we need to look at that from a much more comprehensive level. Instead of looking at single point exposures and LD50s, do we need to actually study these things over long-term exposures and then determine whether or not there's true risk to human health?
Yeah, I a few years ago had this network scientist named Laszlo Barabasi on, and he talked about how, the way that you study something, whether it's safe or not, is you isolate it away from everything else. And that's actually not how anything works. You work as a network of things and a combination. And so I'm totally open to the idea that we should continue to test these things. If they're as safe as we've been, that many people believe they are right now, they should continue to stand up to scrutiny. My biggest thing is whatever your test is that you're going to have a standard before you set the test up. And then if the test passes that standard, then you can't allow giant, lawsuits of multi-billions of dollars, because what it's going to do is make it so nobody ever uses chemistry ever again.
Yeah, that's a very common sense approach you offer there. And I agree wholeheartedly. That's the way we should be looking at this issue.
Headline number 2, one big, beautiful bill delivers $10 billion for farmers. The new spending bill contains major government support for agriculture, delivering over $10 billion in direct farmer support. The package includes $4.5 billion in income tax reductions, $2.2 billion from expanding Section 199A, small business deduction from 20% to 23% permanently, benefiting the 98% of farms that are pass-through entities. Also, on the estate tax front, there is going to be nearly $650 million in savings when the federal exemption is jumping up to $15 million per individual that can be passed down within families, $30 million for couples. The bill also allocates $60 billion over 10 years for farm programs, strengthening safety net through increased reference prices under PLC and enhanced agricultural risk coverage and boosted crop insurance premium subsidies. It's a complicated bill. It's pretty crazy how much was in there for agriculture. It seems like a significant change for farmers who are facing rising input costs and low commodity price. What do you think? Is this going to materially impact farmers?
So again, it's a nuanced answer for me. I got a big picture perspective, and then I got the more nuanced perspective. Big picture, I'm going to say that more money in farmers' pockets is probably a good thing. Hardly anybody's going to disagree with that in the ag world. But the question becomes is, how is that money being paid out, and what does it actually cover? Obviously, a lower tax burden is going to be beneficial, and no one's going to argue that point. But additional subsidies for things like crop insurance and that, I think, are more controversial in whether or not they're actually helping solve the problem that we have in agriculture. What I personally would like to see through my agronomy lens are more funds focused on doing things like helping build soil organic matter and adopting soil health principles. Again, I realize I look through that through a lens that most others don't, given my background in agronomy. However, I feel like so much more of this incentives and money could be deployed in ways that truly benefit for the long term, rather than simply putting a Band-Aid over the wound to try to stop the bleeding. Let's get to the root cause. Let's try to build organic matter. Let's do things that are healthy for the soil, which we know translate to crop productivity. Could pontificate for hours on this topic. I just feel like these resources that are being allocated down through the agriculture channel should be better used to do things that build resilience in the system versus put a Band-Aid on the wound.
Yeah, I'm all about, tax cuts for everything, particularly the estate tax, which is just absolutely ridiculous that we have this. You should be able to pass down what you've created for your family. The thing I'm not happy about is anytime you start increasing the crop insurance subsidies, all you're doing is making that entrenched system stay the same. You make it so, hey, as long as you put a crop in the ground, you make sure you get those numbers so that way your average doesn't go down. Then you're going to be able to claim 80% of that value every single year. I think they're actually even moving that up. They're making it cheaper for that insurance. I don't like this because we need churn. We need the people that have made mistakes, people that didn't do things in the right way, to get out and then allow new people to come in. And without that, it is like woods that never burn. Eventually, you get set up in a system where once that wildfire burns through it, it's way worse. So to me, anytime they're monkeying around and increasing the insurance, I know a lot of farmers like it, but I think it's making the system worse.
That's a great perspective. 100% totally agree with your take on that. And again, it comes back to, are we actually building resilience in agriculture? Are we helping farmers be more productive and profitable with the way we're allocating federal dollars? I just don't see that happening in the current structure that we're approaching this with.
So Farm Bill, is going to eventually have to get voted up or down. Maybe it doesn't. They'll just keep going. Do you foresee a Farm Bill getting passed during this administration?
Man, I think Washington continues to find more and more ways to disappoint those of us that live in farmland. It's unfortunate to watch, despite what we thought was going to be incredible turnaround with this administration. It just seems like there's more cans kicking down the road. Don't get me wrong, there's great things happening on some fronts, but in terms of what Congress has not been able to achieve in making good reforms take place, I think we're all stuck here in disappointment land.
Yeah, and speaking of disappointment, like you mentioned, like you would like to see the tax dollars being used to encourage positive, like soil regenerative practices and things like this. My hesitation about that is, as soon as you put an administration in, and as soon as they start applying these baselines for how to get money, it's just like the way organic used to mean something. And I think, you just have people rush in, they figure out what is the bare minimum, they go against the government system, the check boxes, and ultimately you have a new payment system, but it isn't really getting the outcomes that people were hoping for. Do you have a different perspective?
No, I think that's a totally fair point. I guess if the federal government is going to be in the business of handing out dollars, people are going to step up and have their piece of pie. I mean, and I tell that to farmers directly. I say, if you're serving pie, or if somebody is serving pie, go grab your piece. I know you don't always want to have it, but if you don't have your piece, someone else is going to take it. So we can't change the fact that they're serving pie, but if they're going to serve it, at least go grab your piece. Are there better ways to do that? Should we serve something other than pie? Absolutely. But if they're going to serve it, grab your piece and do what you can with that in order to help build more resilience in your system.
Don't hate the player, hate the game. All right, moving on to headline number 3, New World Screwworm. Mexico outbreak threatens U.S. livestock. The New World Screwworm outbreak in Mexico is continuing to raise alarms across the U.S. livestock country. Over 1,400 livestock cases has now been reported in Oaxaca and Veracruz since November of 24, with the parasite just 700 miles from the U.S. border. Mexico even reported its first human case in April of a 77-year-old woman in Mexico. USDA Secretary Brooke Rollins suspended imports of live cattle last week, also horses and bison from Mexico indefinitely, following the capture of this screwworm. The USDA is intensifying sterile fly release, but the Panama facility that produces these sterile male flies can only produce 100 million weekly, and it's at capacity and it's insufficient to halt the northward spread. It turns out that the U.S. spent millions and millions of dollars to put out sterile flies. This has been a very effective way to keep it down in South America, but this has now been broken through. And just this last week, there was a suspected claim of screwworm in Missouri, but that report was debunked by the USDA. But it showed that the cattle markets are scared because they reacted both up and down with that. A U.S. outbreak could cost the livestock industry $1.9 billion annually, with Texas's $15 billion cattle industry at the greatest risk. The bipartisan Stop Screwworm Act proposes funding for a new U.S. facility, but faces delays. So the 1972 outbreak saw 90,000 Texas cattle cases. And crop insurance doesn't cover livestock diseases like this, so ranchers could be vulnerable. Joe, I know you focus on crops, but this livestock situation could ripple through the entire agricultural economy. Do you think it's possible to stop the spread of a disease carried by flies?
I have a very simple, straightforward answer to that question. How well did we do at stopping COVID? I mean, when humans try to intervene in slowing down Mother Nature's ability to spread diseases, look what happens. No, I don't think so. Now, granted, the sterile fly program seems to have some degree of impact, but can we really stop a disease from spreading like that? I don't think so. The takeaway for me is
sterile flies have proven to be effective. I think when they pushed it down in the 70s and 80s, they were using this strategy, which now has been a strategy they've used to jump over to malaria, which has been able to push some of that back. But I mean, I'm with you. Like, it just seems like flies, you're talking about Central and South America. It's huge swaths of land. You're talking about flies that are out in the wild. To me, it seems like it's almost a foregone conclusion, but that shouldn't mean that we should do what the Biden administration did and just to start proactively killing off chickens, because that's not going to help either.
Now, I wonder if there's a way for us to mask the flies. Sorry if that's too controversial, but if we could just get little masks on the flies, maybe they'd stop the disease.
Maybe do a little bit of social distancing.
Just throwing out some ideas there.
All right. Finally, headline number 4, a $66 million SNAP fraud hits agricultural's food chain. A massive $66 million fraud scheme has exposed vulnerabilities in the USDA's food assistance programs that directly support agriculture. USDA employee Arlissa Davis, ironically tasked with identifying SNAP fraud, instead facilitated it through $36 million in fake redemptions and $30 million via unauthorized terminals. This fraud diverted funds that would have supported agricultural demands. SNAP supports over 41 million Americans with $120 billion in annual benefits that boost farm product purchases. The $66 million could have purchased approximately 13 million pounds of produce directly supporting farmers who rely on SNAP-driven sales. SNAP sales at farmers markets alone generated $19 million for small farmers in 23. Every $1 billion in SNAP spending generates $180 million in farm production. So this $66 million fraud represents potentially $11.8 million in lost farm output. Joe, seems to me we should not have SNAP as a part of the farm bill. However, of course, those are going to go to purchasing goods that farmers are making. What do you think? Is fraud just an inevitable part of having a program that assists the people with food?
You know, it's a sad state of affairs when we just have to accept that that's part of our standard quo. I don't agree with that. I think it's ridiculous. You look at what the DOGE program has done in rooting out fraud, waste, and abuse. How can anybody in America look at that and go, that's a bad thing? You know, whether it's the SNAP program or any of the other handful of programs that they've identified where fraud, waste, and abuse is taking place, how can anybody disagree with that? We should all be rallying together to get behind everything that the DOGE program has done to root this out, clean these programs up, and figure out better ways to allocate our hard-earned tax dollars. That's just common sense.
Yeah, what I really hate about this fraud and feel like they should do something to make an example out of somebody if they're proven to be guilty is that I worked at several camps for inner city kids, and there I met kids that genuinely didn't have food. They would genuinely wake up in the morning and not have food for breakfast, or they would come home not having dinner. And while this was completely shocking to me when I experienced it, it's real. And yet when you have this kind of fraud, it's really easy to go in and be like, well, just cut the whole damn thing. I mean, this is all getting ripped off. People don't need it. They're buying soda. They're buying things that they don't need. But the truth is, like, there is a need. People are hungry. We have way more food and we should be able to feed them or at least provide them support. But this kind of fraud makes me say, get this out of the hands of the government.
Yeah. One bad screwworm fly spoils the soup, eh? It's too bad.
All right, that's going to do it for this week's headlines. Thanks for those that sent in some stories. That was very helpful. If you have news that you think we should cover on the Ag Tribes Report, send it to vance@legacyinterviews.com or hit me up on X @VanceCrow. All right, moving on to the Bitcoin land price report. Last week, Bitcoin was sitting at a cool $111,000, and today we're down at 106,000. So it's down a little bit more than 3.8% from last week. Joe, what is an acre of high quality farmland where you are in northern Wisconsin? Where are you in Wisconsin?
We are in St. Croix County. It's the fastest growing county in the state of Wisconsin for many years running, just outside of Minneapolis, St. Paul metro area on the Wisconsin side. An acre of farmland in our neighborhood is going to go for around $8,000.
All right. So with the price of Bitcoin being 106,000, then that means that 1 acre costs 0.075 Bitcoin. In other words, 1 Bitcoin would buy you 13.25 acres in St. Croix, Wisconsin. How does that sit with you, Joe?
So I'm just super excited about the way Bitcoin is trending. Not as excited about the way land prices are trending, because anybody who wants to get into farming, it's become a barrier to entry that you cannot get over. So unless you've got, like in so many places in America, unless you've got family who's willing to give it to you, you just can't get started. If you were to give me money today and say, go buy an acre of land or buy some Bitcoin, I think I'm going after the Bitcoin. I think that's a far more potential upside opportunity.
Oh, I love hearing that. And, from doing these legacy interviews, just today, I was talking with a wonderful woman from Canada. She was, in her 90s. And she talked about how expensive land prices were when they were there. She was like, if you weren't in an area where the government was giving away land, the idea that you would be able to purchase it, and this would have been, 70 years ago, was really difficult. And I think that's just the state of play. But so you're right. People can't get in on land, but they can get in on Bitcoin, and the appreciation of that may make it so it's possible for you to buy land one day.
Yeah, absolutely. So we live in a unique township where it's zoned agricultural. A minimum parcel size is 35 acres if you want to buy a piece of land here. It's awesome because it does preserve agricultural practices in our township, and our farm board's been adamant about preserving that. But imagine if you're a new farmer looking to come into the area and establish yourself. You're buying a minimum of 35 acres in these chunks. Or if you want to build a house out here, you got to buy it in 35 acre chunks. So it's got, it's good on one side, but bad on the other. If you're somebody starting out new, it's going to be very difficult to get in.
Oh man, I've never heard of that, and I have mixed feelings about it. I like the idea of being able to keep parcels together, and 35 acres sounds like a good chunk. But like always, I think you should be able to do what you want with your property. So I don't love that. So where are you at on Bitcoin, Joe?
So I love Bitcoin. I think it's an incredible asset. It has become a significant part of my retirement portfolio. I have a quick story for you. If you dial back the clock to around the January 24, if you remember back at that time, that was about when they were about to approve the Bitcoin ETFs. And so at that time, being somewhat modestly interested in Bitcoin, I decided I was going to buy the Grayscale Bitcoin ETF because it was below net asset value, which means you're buying it at a discount. So I bought a bunch of that Grayscale Bitcoin asset at the discount to NAV with the assumption that they were going to approve these ETFs. And so I used Fidelity as my primary broker, knowing that Fidelity was going to put together the Fidelity Bitcoin ETF. The assumption was that I would hold on to that Grayscale Bitcoin until the ETFs launch, watch the Bitcoin price appreciate, swap out the Grayscale for the Fidelity Bitcoin fund, and then establish a pretty good, strong position that I would continue to accumulate. And rolled the dice on that gamble, won that gamble. It was awesome. Now sitting on a pretty good, decent size of Bitcoin relative to my total portfolio value, and will continue to grow that stack as much as I can inside my Roth IRA. And that's really the beauty that I wanted to share with you and your audience, is that even if you don't buy Bitcoin directly, which I do have, there are ways to put this inside Roth IRA retirement funds that you can watch that asset appreciate inside those vehicles as well. So that's been an awesome, awesome thing to have.
Yeah, and I think there's talk right now of potentially making it so you might not have to pay capital gains on Bitcoin, but that doesn't exist now. But to be able to buy it with like a Roth IRA, to have already paid the taxes on that money and know that whatever appreciation you're getting, you're not going to have to give away to the government. I got to say that is a pretty sweet gig if you're playing the overall bigger picture.
Yeah. Thrilled that I never have to pay taxes on that investment inside the Roth. That's a huge win.
Well, if you are interested in buying Bitcoin, the exchange that I use is river.com. They've proven to be an excellent exchange. You're able to do dollar cost averaging, just have it set up where it buys just a little bit of Bitcoin every day or every week or every month. And if you buy using the show code from this podcast, you'll not only be buying on a great exchange, but you will be helping support the show. So I will include a link to our promo code, and you can use that when purchasing Bitcoin. All right, moving on to the Peter Thiel paradox. This is where I'm going to ask Joe, what is one thing that you believe that almost nobody in your ag tribe agrees with you on?
Sure. So we're going to go down the agronomy rabbit hole a bit, specifically in nitrogen management realm. I have someone who's been using the Haney Soil Health Test for the last 3 growing seasons with the intention of trying to answer the question is, can we do a better job of measuring and managing nitrogen in corn? So for those who aren't aware of, it's really difficult to measure nitrogen, especially in season when growing a corn crop. A lot of guys are going to put together a nitrogen program, let's say in the middle of winter, stick with that program throughout the entire growing season and call it good good enough come harvest. I don't think that's a good way to grow crops. I think we can do better with tools at our disposal. So I've used the Haney Soil Health Test to measure soil nitrogen levels prior to side dress nitrogen application, the one inflection point through the growing season where we can actually fine tune the dials. And when using this test, I've been able to help guys not exactly find their seat in the stadium, but I can get them to the stadium and help them find their section. Best way I can describe it. There's no test on earth that's going to help us dial in exactly how much nitrogen a corn crop needs because it's just too darn variable and it runs away from us all the time. However, the Haney Soil Health Test has helped me really dial this in to the point where we're not excessively or ridiculously under applying nitrogen. We can find a relative sweet spot there that I think can help save guys money as well as increase their productivity, especially in extreme moisture or drought environments.
So I have no frame of reference on this. Is this a controversial take?
It is, absolutely. There's many experts, especially in the university world, that will say the Haney Soil Health Test is a bunch of garbage. And it's because they don't understand it. They've never actually used it in a way that I have in trying to do a better job of dialing in side dress nitrogen rates. It's a function of their unawareness of how powerful the tool actually is.
So tell me, what is that they're missing about this? How do you do that test, or what are you reading when you see that?
Yeah, so I go out 2 weeks before side dress nitrogen application, which allows as much as the season to elapse as possible, which means as much nitrogen dynamics takes place as possible as well. So we're trying to grab a very narrow snapshot window of time of what soil nitrogen status is based on how much moisture we have, because moisture is what drives nitrogen loss in the system. So if we let as much season elapse as possible, as much rain to fall or lack of rain to fall, we're doing the best job we can to capture in a moment in time what that soil nitrogen status is. We've had 2 awesome growing seasons here. 23 was dry, 24 was wet. So we have bookends to know what the maximum was in terms of nitrogen loss or gain. And so using this test at that inflection point in time, right before side dress application, allows us then to have a nitrogen measurement that you can't get through other tests. They measure it traditionally, they measure it in a way that's not as well understood or accepted. And when you combine these different measures, it gives you insight that you can't get from any other type of test. And so that's what I've been able to stumble across. It almost sounds too good to be true. Perhaps it is. Time will tell. But in the meantime, I have found this tool very useful in helping guys do a better job of managing their nitrogen on their corn crops.
Well, Joe, I'm going to give you a first time Ag Tribes Report score of an NA. I have absolutely no way of knowing if this is controversial or not, but I applaud you finding a topic, and I'm sure within the next few days I will hear back as to whether or not people think you're being crazy or if this is a good thing to think about.
I'll consider that a compliment, and I appreciate that.
You got to take it because I don't know nearly enough about it. So, all right, moving on to the last section. This is the worthy adversaries. Who is one person that you respect but strongly disagree with?
Great question. So I spent a lot of time today thinking about the answer to this question, and I really went through my memory bank to find if there was a single individual out there that I felt like, I respect this person, but I just disagree. I couldn't find a single person. So I'm going to give you kind of a more of a ho-hum answer, perhaps. What I'm going to say are the glyphosate absolutists. And so let me explain that very briefly. I'm very active on the Everything Cover Crops Facebook page. It's 71,000 cover crop enthusiasts that come together on Facebook and talk about cover crops. I love it. It's a great learning opportunity about everything cover crops, hence the name of the group. I recently put up a post on there offering some perspective about how much glyphosate gets applied to a square foot of cropland using normal rates. I just put that there for perspective. And what I saw was a whole bunch of absolutists come out of the woodwork on both sides of the glyphosate debate, whether it's good or bad. And so the people who I really disagree with, but also respect, are the ones who say glyphosate is poison and we're killing everything and everyone. I have a very difficult relationship with glyphosate because as an agronomist, I realize it's the most effective grass killer on the planet, but I don't like the chemistry because I do believe at high enough doses, it's probably causing negative effects in humans, in plants, obviously, and in soil microbiology. So again, it's a really difficult debate I have with this chemistry. I respect, but I disagree with the absolutists who say it's killing everything because as an agronomist, we need the tool. We need the tool until you come up with a better way to kill weeds that isn't so potentially destructive to biology.
Well, I do think that it's a weak-ass answer to not give a name, but I will say this. This is actually a much better Peter Thiel paradox to say, hey, I actually really love the guys that are the absolutists that hate it because they've got something to them. Yeah, you got to respect it. And frankly, like I think the extremes are probably where we're going to discover some interesting answers. The milquetoast middle answer is probably not going to get us anywhere closer to is this healthy or not, and having people be absolutists, but then putting your money where your mouth is and actually running tests. I get so sick of, and actually I argue with Grok about when I turn on conspiracy theory, and then I argue with it about glyphosate safety. It was actually quite interesting. Be very interested to anybody that's out there that has Grok to try this out, because even its answers are pretty weak. I think they could have better ones. And I think the only way you're going to get better arguments against glyphosate that make you say, all right, let's run the right kind of test, let's do something different, is somebody that is fervently believes it and also understands either chemistry or microbiology or other areas around it.
Very well said. Very well said.
All right, Joe, that is going to do it for our show. If people wanted to find out more about your agronomy and your your practices, where could they go to learn more about you?
Sure. Thank you. So I'm most active on Facebook at Ailts Agronomy, AILTS. I'm also somewhat active, less so active on X as well, under the same handle, Ailts Agronomy.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and doing this. It was a last minute thing, but man, we had a great conversation up in Wisconsin, and you did not disappoint today. Thank you for sticking around to listen to the Ag Tribes Report. If you are thinking about getting a Father's Day gift for your father, I can tell you that a legacy interview will be one of the most profound experiences of his life. There are a lot of dads that are either love to tell stories and would just love to have this opportunity. And there's a lot of dads out there that this will be kind of a stretch for them. It might be a little bit difficult for them to tell stories because they don't open up. But if you come to him and you say, Dad, we got this for you for Father's Day, but really it's for the grandkids because they are going to want to know your stories. And I'm going to want them to know who you are and were. Then please do a legacy interview. And I can't tell you how meaningful it is for these men when they leave this place. They always say the same thing. I had no idea it was going to be like this. I loved getting a chance to reflect on my life. So if you're interested in purchasing a legacy interview for your father for Father's Day, go to legacyinterviews.com and schedule a meeting with me. We'll sit down, we'll talk about what stories you want to capture, what's most important, what you're concerned about, and we'll get you lined up with a great interview. Also, remember, if you're interested in buying Bitcoin, we will put a link in the show notes that will get you set up with river.com. All right, that's going to do it for this week's show. I want to remind you that you should always feel free to disagree.